Welcome to the January 25th of 2021 meeting of the Albany Common Council's Public Safety Committee. We're back again working on local law J that governs the CPRB and how they function. So I'll start by
You're muted.
Oh, I don't know how I did that. Okay, so Mr. Pichardo, can you just call out just the committee members for me? You're
One
muted.
second. Sorry, 1 second. I have a lot. It's a lot of people coming in. From the Common Council, we have Council President Corey Ellis, Councilman Johnson, Richard Conti, Kathy Fahey, Tom Hoey, Sonia Frederick, and that's all I see for now. Kelly Kimbrough as well. From staff, myself, Daniel Gillespie, and Michelle Andre. I see several violence prevention task force members. I see CPRB members. I see, yep, Alfredo just entered. I see Dr. Dorsey Clears. All right.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Hello. Yeah, okay, and so
Jamel Robinson just entered as well.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Robinson. So, excuse me, just moving right along. What we'll do is I'll ask that Mr. Conti just kind of say a few words about, the legislation, and then we'll move right into the actual legislation and what changes we made and go through that. Because we've already had 2 previous meetings, and I think we need to move forward. Mr. Conti.
Great, thank you. So as Kelly said, we've had 2 previous meetings where we've taken an extensive public comment. We've also had the 3 letters from the CPRB with different sets of recommendations. And then since our last meeting also, I guess last week, the draft reports from the collaborative came out, including the report that deals with police oversight. So taking all that into consideration, there is a revised draft that attempts to reflect the various comments and suggestions that have come in, and also the collaborative recommendations. And I'm going to turn it over to JR, our research counsel, to walk through the proposal and to indicate the revisions or suggested revisions that have been incorporated in there. And Jay, I don't know if we can put this up on the screen as you walk through.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring up both legislations at the same time.
Okay, so I'm going to turn that over to JR. And also, if you were the email notice that went out earlier today, the last one, I know Michelle did send out the revised draft.
So just for the public's notice, the most recent draft is on the left side, and the previous draft is on the, the previous one is on the right. So I will scroll through and get to where they're both equal. So give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. There we go. One thing that the CPRB recommended is they wanted independent counsel. So in hearing that recommendation, we added here that they could retain their own counsel. And then a contracts provision that anything over 10,000 would go before the council. if it's not within their budget, and if there's not enough adequate funds with it, so they can go back before the council. Going further down, give me 1 second. Let's see if I can do that at the same time. The next one that was added was that we added the auditing privileges for the CPRB. So this is where the line right here added another subsection E, that the board may perform an audit by majority vote. And then this is where a lot of revisions were made. So in section 442-342 was striked out and has been changed to initiation of complaints as opposed to filing complaints. All this was struck out for newer language. So upon here, as you can see, the complaints may be received directly by the board or upon referral from the Office of Professional Standard, the mayor, the council, any council member, the city clerk, or the chief. Any complaint received and accepted by the board shall be transmitted to OPS, and any complaint received and accepted by OPS shall be transmitted to the board. Complaints shall be filed within 180 days. Giving this subsection B gives a little wide more options of how they can accept complaints. The subsection C is a little procedural, where if anybody complains that they're referred to an organization that advocates for people who have experienced police misconduct. Subsection D is the full access, where the CPRB will be granted any full access to any complaints by OPS. The subsection E is when a complaint is filed and the department is in possession of any audio or video footage pertaining to the incident, that all that information be turned over. So wider swath. Further in it, 343, I revised completely and struck out from review of complaints and put powers and duties. Majority of the section was stricken for cleaner purposes. And going here, this section now grants the CPRB to conduct independent investigations as necessary, and also the power to use subpoenas to compel testimony and the production of evidence, and the power to discipline APD officers if a complaint or of misconduct is sustained. This also, subsection B, also grants the authority to the board with collaboration of the chief of the police department to develop a disciplinary matrix, which shall include clear delineated penalty levels with ranges of sanctions, which progressively increases based on the gravity of the misconduct and the number of prior sustained complaints. And this will be done in conjunction with the police, OPS, and the CPRB. Subsection C grants review and assessments of all APD policies, procedures, patterns, practices, and training, and recommended changes to APD, and that the chief will transmit any recommendations with acknowledgements of receipt from the chair of the CPRB to the chief of police. D, that they shall have a cooperative relationship. E is accessibilities, that the board shall provide language access for limited or non-English proficient complaints and witnesses at all stages of the investigation and adjudicative process. The board shall provide reasonable accommodations in accordance with federal and state law to individuals with disability at all stages, including to ASL services, interpreter, and auxiliary services. Subsection G, board investigation of complaints. This just goes over the view of what the investigation of complaints can be. Also gives the procedure of how subpoenas may be issued, which will be based on an affirmative vote of a majority of the board. that any complaints that OPS is in possession, that they be transmitted completely to the board. Subsection 5, that one police officer holding the rank of captain or higher shall be made available by the chief to the board at the board's request to serve as a consultant or advisor should questions arise from the members of the board regarding specific police practices, policies, or general order. The officer so assigned shall neither be from OPS nor the commanding officer of the officers involved in the case being reviewed. A complainant may at any time decline to have their complaint investigated and reviewed by the boards, but that any declination must be made in writing. In that statements may be of complaints or APD officers or employees shall be given credibility, weight. Participation or lack of participation in the hearing process may be considered by the board as one factor in the determination of the credibility. This right here it tells the chief to take no action on a complaint, whether received directly by APD or by the board until receipt of the board's findings and decisions or notice that the board has determined no disciplinary action is appropriate. But nonetheless, the chief still retains authority to suspend any APD officers during the investigation and adjudication of a complaint against an APD officer. And then furthermore, any information that the chief discusses in public or with the media must be made available to the board. And that is all the changes since the last rendition of the local law J.
Yep. And so what I would want now is to hear from committee members regarding any other changes, thoughts, concerns. And I know it's a lot, so, but I think maybe Richard, you want to start?
No, I mean, there's a good,
Oh,
Am I-
right, no.
yeah,
Committee members.
Yeah.
Miss Frederick.
Thank you. So definitely a lot of substantial changes have been made to this legislation. I think it's really hitting a lot of those key points that we wanted to see addressed. So very happy to see that. I have two questions. In regards to the audits that could be conducted, do we have any further sense of who would take on that auditing responsibility?
that would be up to the CPRB.
Right, yeah.
And if it's in their budget, they can do either by RFP or in conjunction with another department.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the clarification. Next question, I just want to acknowledge the comment received from the Center for Social Justice, Dr. Alice Green. She mentioned that in terms of having, the ability to, get FOIL requests and then getting the data, what is the next step? So if the police department, for example, didn't comply with a data request, what is the penalty in doing so? And not so penalty, but like what is there to make sure that we really make it clear, like we want the data in a timely fashion. So I just want to bring that up and don't know if we want to brainstorm any additional changes there, if we have any additional comments on that already.
Right, and what I would suggest is if folks have, thoughts on the matter, we can adjust it accordingly. Recently, recently in the news, the city actually paid a cost or a penalty for not complying. So I would argue that is a problem and it needs to be complied with. So I think your question is, and I can't see any comments on Facebook, is what happens if they don't comply? Is there any repercussion or penalty for the police department? So we'd have to determine Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So
There's
in
a
our
fine.
legislation,
Mhm.
as it stands in our legislation, do we want to add anything about that fine? Because I think right now it just states that they need to write a letter or acknowledge to the Common Council and to the CPRB. But do we want to add any additional language there to sort of put the fine
Well,
out
this-
there in addition to what would happen?
Yeah, well, the CPRB is not the information gathering spot. And I think with the collaboration, the collaboration group, there was another group dealing with the policies and things of that nature. So I think we should see what their recommendation is, because this is a separate recommendation group. So I think we should wait as a council, read over the other collaborative groups who had that in their group when it came to policies and procedures, and see what they said. And if they didn't say, see what their suggestion is. But most of it is covered under 50A, and the penalty is a huge fine, as we already seen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, I just had a question because the thing scrolled up. What is the length of term? I saw that it's a 2-term that you can serve on it, but I couldn't see how long the term was for on the CPRB.
I believe it's 3 years. I'll pull it
3
up
years.
right
3 years.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah,
3
there's no
years.
change. This doesn't make any change
Yeah.
to what the current term is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other, that was it for committee members, council members, any questions? No? None?
Fredo has his hand up.
Oh, I can't. Where is he? Not even on my screen. Okay.
Is it okay to speak now?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Notice there's, I understand why you couldn't see me. I know there's been some hesitation with, the fact that this has taken some time. But I do think it has been able to put in a lot of thoughts and ideas that came from the community through these meetings. And I think that is beneficial. I think the fact that there was going to be funding for this, that, additional funding, I know there's already funding, but there's going to be funding that is going to assist in getting this process. That's beneficial. So I think we've got a better piece of document than we had a few months ago. And I know it's been a long process to get here, but by weeding it out a bit, we've been able to get more input from residents and get more input in general. So I look forward to hear what other thoughts individuals have.
Kelly?
I hear Mr. Igo. Mr. Igo?
Yes, I apologize. I tried like hell to get on this Zoom in and out for about half an hour, but I don't know what I missed. Did you go through the whole legislation or just taking? Bits
Yeah,
and
we did
pieces?
we did like a side by side and kind of ran through
Okay,
what the changes were.
okay. Well, are you taking comments or I'll listen to everybody? My
Well,
only, my
well, we'll
biggest
listen-
concern. Okay, I'll listen to everybody first.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I guess since you missed the earlier part,
Okay,
yeah.
it's fair.
maybe.
Because I have something that I'm concerned about, so I'll listen through.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Fahey and then Mr. Conti.
Thank you, Kelly. This is a very impressive piece of legislation. I know I've been on the council for many years now, and we've been talking about the CPRB having subpoena power for many, many years. Much more teeth in order to take a look at these problem situations. So I really commend the work everyone has done. I was curious to know how you decided on the amount of funding. It said not less than 1% of the total proposed budget of the Albany Police Department. Did you actually go through and figure out, get an idea how much this is going to cost?
Yeah, we did, Mr. Conti.
Yeah, there are some, and actually, I think I was on and I think JR was on a webinar this afternoon that the law school was doing. And I think in New York City, if I heard correctly, their budget is 0.65% of the police department budget. But there are some, the idea was to provide at least a floor and to provide a guaranteed amount that wasn't subject to, any kind of politics or, manipulation or whatever. So 1% would be about $540,000, which should be and that's a floor, not the actual ceiling, but the floor is no less than 1%. So that was the intent, to provide the guarantee of a certain level of funding. That's significantly more than what's in the budget right now. And should probably be enough. I don't know. I mean, the other challenge here is that the CPRB needs to develop a budget for what they want in terms of their staffing needs and outside activities, in terms of audits and et cetera. So we don't really have that part yet. But as a beginning, it brings something in.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Conti?
Yes, so I would probably just have a few maybe tweaks, which I won't even get into, but I think we should probably add something in there on the funding side, going back to the budget, just clearly providing and stating the authority of the CPRB to develop an annual budget within the amounts that they have. And they adopt the budget, and that it be submitted to the council and the mayor, but it's their budget that they adopt within the funding that's available. I think another issue really is also the effective date. Some of the provisions really won't be available. For example, funding's not going to be available necessarily right away, but there are provisions that probably should be effective immediately. And there are other provisions that might make more sense to target a January 1 effective date, giving time to work on implementation and other things that need to be done so that you're ready to hit the ground running fully on January 1. But that's just another issue to think about in terms of there are different parts here. What can happen immediately? What's going to need that lead time to really be able to put in place?
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have their?
I want to follow up, just Richard's statement also with, people talked about they wanted an independent CPRB, and this legislation starts that process. And so when Richard brought up, they're going to have to come up with their own budget. They're going to have to come up with what they need and what they need to pay for. So it does become what people have been saying. It's an independent body. The councils we're passing a law to create it. We're providing some funding for it. But as Richard said, we'll try to figure out those dates when things get active, but it will be on them to create whatever type of board they're going to create, whatever type of work. It's going to be on them. It will be independent. And so those are things that I really want people to really get the gist of, and not look towards the council as what the council is going to do, or is the council going to provide this, social workers or anything of that nature, investigators, that's all going to be decided by that CPRB, which will be that independent body, as we've heard from citizens.
Okay, any other,
Kelly, Lauren has her hand up.
okay, I was trying, let me, okay, no council members, no committee members, we're good, okay.
And Kelly, I just had a few comments on behalf of Corporation Counsel, but I didn't want to jump in front of any.
Okay, so we'll take
council members.
you right now, Mr. Williams.
Sure.
I'll get you, Miss Manning.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out, it wasn't giving me the option to raise my hand, so I apologize for that. And I also apologize, I didn't get a chance to look at this until just a short time ago, but looking at section 42.334, the new additions there, with regard to the Corporation Counsel's office, shall advise and represent the board as it would any other public boards in accordance with the law department's duties. That language I think is probably fine. The only complicating factor is most other boards that we represent don't have, the law school as a resource or involved in the situation. So it may help to clarify, if there are any clarifications that can be made with regard to what duties the law school has, what duties the law department may have. That could be helpful. And then subsection H regarding the $10,000 for, I assume that's referring to retainer agreements for outside counsel. Doesn't actually say as much, it just says to cover the cost of an agreement. So I think it could be helpful to spell out in more detail what sort of agreements or what sort of outside services that covers. Somebody else mentioned with regard to the audit provision, how that would be done. The language is fairly vague. It just says the board may, by majority vote, perform an audit or direct that an audit be performed. I'm particularly thinking with regard to the board performing its own audit, how that would be done. I suppose that's something the board could work out by itself. So it could be a board bylaw sort of thing, or the alternative would be to enshrine that here in the law itself, how they would go about doing that. Again, with regard to specificity, I'm moving down now. I'm in section 42.342. It says efforts to simplify the procedure shall be made to encourage filing. Just what sort of efforts shall be made.
Right, which subsection are you in?
That was again, sorry, my notes are fairly slapdash here because I was doing this at the last minute. That is in subsection B. And that's talking about the filing procedures. Subsection C talks about before the proceeding with the complaint process, the complainant shall be made aware of and referred to organizations that advocate for people who have experienced police misconduct. Just specificity there as well. Who should make that referral to the complainant? Will that be the board itself? Will the board, somebody on the law school staff? Just trying to spell these things out. Subsection D, regarding the CPRB having full access to information about any officer. I know 50H opened up a lot, 50A opened up a lot of the police information compared to what the situation used to be, but just in case there is any confidential information that the board may be privy to that they can't divulge publicly, it wouldn't hurt to have a provision to that effect within subsection D. Moving down to section 42, 343, subsection A. The board shall have the power to conduct independent investigations as necessary. I assume that provision is meant to be broad on purpose, but it doesn't say how the board should go about initiating investigations, doesn't mention, if a majority vote is needed, or, or give any specifics as to how that would take place. Subsection B regarding the disciplinary matrix. The board shall establish a disciplinary matrix in conjunction with the chief of the Albany Police Department. The subsection doesn't really say what the disciplinary matrix would do, or who it would affect, or how it would be integrated vis-a-vis the disciplinary procedures that are already in place because of the police unions. And it may be an aspirational sort of thing, and that's fine. I just wanted to, make sure that we try to define its purpose, I suppose. Subsection E, with regard to accessibility, the board shall provide language access for limited or non-English proficient complaints and witnesses at all stages of the investigations. That's great. That's a noble goal. It just, how would that happen? Who on the board would make that happen? Would it be through a call-in service? And then just a few more. Subsection G4 refers to thought it referred to, within the time frame allotted in accordance with the police bargaining agreement. There's a few different police collective bargaining agreements, so I may just want to pluralize that and say in accordance with the relevant police bargaining agreements. And then subsection G6, a complainant may at any time decline to have their complaint investigated and reviewed by the board. Such declination shall be made in writing. I guess my question would be, what happens if the complainant does decline to have the complaint investigated? Does that cease the CPRB's investigation and procedure, or is the CPRB allowed to carry on without the complainant? Just not sure what would happen in that situation. I think that was everything I had at the moment. Again, I apologize for the kind of scattershot nature of my comments there.
But thank you, Mr. Williams, for that. Most of that seemed like it would fall in the realm of like tweaks or fine tuning or clarifying things. So
sure.
Thank you. Can you do me a favor? Your notes, can we get those to JR to adjust, make those adjustments?
Yes, well, I will put them in a legible format and send them over to JR.
Okay, so I can't, if there are no other.
I had a few questions.
Yes, Dr. Pleers, go ahead.
Thank you. Going back to the audit, there were already some questions posed. So as I was listening, some questions come to mind in terms of the type of audit that the CPRB is looking to have conducted. Is it, this is something that I'm sure the body is still trying to think through, but is it the processes? Is it the CPRB's compliance with the legislation? Is it the police department's compliance with the CPRB specific legislation? So just things to think about as you are building out that language on the audit. And also being mindful of the language. So for example, there was, I think in one of the sentences, it says something like may, which is passive. And so it's not definitive. And so depending on who is in the decision-making seat at the time can say, oh, well, it says may, so we're not going to do this. So just being conscious of the language used. I'm learning that lesson myself. So, and then the other thing about the budget, one of the biggest complaints that I received from the APD racial bias audit was the cost. And so what I underestimated coming in as chief city auditor is how much audits actually cost. They are very expensive and sometimes can range you 6 figures. And so I just caution you all as you're thinking about your budget to factor that in, because these audits are very expensive. We pay $80,000 for our racial bias audit. We pay roughly between 80 and a little over 100,000 annually for our financial audit. And so just put that out there for food for thought, so that you don't find yourself in a space where you're ready to conduct the audit, but you don't have sufficient funds to do that. The other question / comment, I don't know if I may have missed this, but some information that the body may want to also solicit from the whether it may be Corp Counsel, is the lawsuit data. And that was something that we pulled for the APD racial bias auditors, looking at lawsuits filed against the city due to interactions between police and residents. And oftentimes folks aren't looking at that, but we recently, via an E&A transfer, and this is a public meeting, there was a lawsuit settled, $200,000, in which the city will be paying out because of a settlement involving a citizen and the police department. That's $200,000. The other thing is, in our audit findings, there was an officer who was involved in 3 separate incidents, lawsuits in 1 year. And so this is just information I think the CPRB should also have as you all are making these types of decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. So just looking at, let's see. We're gonna allow Mr. McGee. Is that you? We'll go Mr. McGee, Laura Manning, and then Ava. Okay, that's the order.
Thanks, Kelly. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things in regards to some of the proposed language that was added into the CPRB local law. One of the things that we found an issue with was 42339, which is the training and orientation of members. It says that upon a member being appointed to the committee, within 6 months, they're supposed to partake in the Community Police Academy. And that actually did not happen in the case this time around. A CPRB member missed the Citizens Police Academy. So we're just looking for a little bit more oversight in that if the members are going to partake in that, and we're going to look at the CPRB and all the rules imposed here on officers, that the CPRB also follows its own rules as well. The other thing, Kelly, is that we looked into the subpoena powers, the records of an officer, obviously with the repeal of 50A. Obviously, certain things are now privy to the public, but we also want to make sure that, like I believe it was already brought up by Corporation Counsel, that some things are not revealed to the public. But it's very explicit in our contract under Article 4 and Article 5 in regards to discipline and departmental investigations. It kind of goes completely against what the CPRB is looking for in terms of subpoena powers, final say in discipline. As it sits right now, final say in discipline is rested upon the employer, and the CPRB is not our employer. We also, the discipline matrix, if you look, our contract governs our disciplinary process and how discipline is divvied out to an officer. So you're looking at, if you're talking about a disciplinary matrix in the contract, that's completely contradictory to what the language we have now. So that would all be subject to negotiations. And based on what legal counsel is telling us from Counsel 82, obviously we cannot negotiate our contract until our union issues are resolved. I don't know if that's going to throw a little wrench into things for the CPRB for that language for subpoena power and final say in discipline. Also, in terms of subpoena power, officers are entitled to their constitutional rights and garrity rights. An officer cannot be compelled to testify and incriminate himself under his garrity. So that also raises some questions in regards to a CPRB member or CPRB subpoenaing an officer. And obviously we're governed under, you're looking at union representation at a CPRB meeting or CPR questioning. So we have a couple issues that we were looking in today under Article 4 and Article 5 of our contract under the CBA. So I just don't know if that kind of wants to change some things in regards to the language that's in the proposed law.
Yeah, and so Mr. McGee, what I would say to that is we're the legislative body of the city here, so we'll put together the legislation, and in the end, obviously you all have rights, and this can't supersede any of that. It'll be governed by the collective bargaining agreement, so this will be in place, and then when you all get together with the administration to work through those issues, that's where most of the stuff I think that you're talking about right now will be dealt with. It'll either work or it won't.
That's right.
So that's where we are with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to give, who knows what our timeline is for collective bargaining. But we do have, these employees, our unionized employees who also have rights that just can't be trampled on at this point. But like I said, I don't know how long, Counsel Kimbrough, I don't have a timeline for how long our negotiations will probably, be off from, just to give everyone, kind of a heads up.
Thank you for that, Mr. McGee. Okay. Again, was it Ms. Manning, Ms. Ayers, and then Officer Lewis?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, and I didn't spell this out at the beginning because we jumped right into it, but we're looking at a 3-minute time frame for speaking.
Oh, I don't need
okay?
that much time.
I know you don't, but I always fail to do that, and then I end up running into issues. So thank you.
Got you. So I have to do my name and address, right? Okay, so Lauren Manning, my address is 8 Tyler Trice Terrace, Albany, New York, 12207. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Albany. And just some questions, they were kind of addressed, but not my issues. So in that subsection H, where you guys are talking about $10,000 to retain counsel, would that be per incident or total?
What I would actually,
that language is not specific to one particular thing. It's just in the event that if there's a cost that exceeds a certain threshold, there's a procedure in which is in place.
Okay, so that procedure would be going back to the council. Is there a process to do that? Like not having to wait to the next council meeting? I'm just thinking about, would that create a barrier, and why that number? How'd you come up? Why 10,000? Like if they have a budget and they're independent, shouldn't they be able to decide what they spend their budget on? Like why would they have to go back to the council as long as they're utilizing their budget that was given? And not that I need an answer right now. It's more of a statement / question, something for you guys to think about, I guess. It just doesn't make sense if they're given a budget and they're independent, why they would need permission to spend more than $10,000. So that's that comment. Then I'd like to bring up sort of the CPRB and the public information and what we were talking about around 50A and confidentiality. Kelly, as my council member, sort of knows my concerns about this already. Back in September at the CPRB meeting, it was decided that officers would still be referred to as target officers at public meetings, even though 50A allows for their identity to be shared. And I think it's really important that we don't continue to do business as usual, which was suggested, and that anything that is public under FOIL be provided to the public by the CPRB. Section 8, where they talk about the chief would still be allowed to suspend an officer, and they, they can't do anything without the board, but could suspend an officer. Could that be suspension and termination? I mean, what if the act was so egregious, the chief felt like this person should be terminated right now and it fell within those collective bargaining agreements for termination? I don't think we'd want to wait till the board took action if it was that egregious and the chief felt somebody should be terminated. And then I just sort of have, this is a real question I would like an answer to now, if possible, after listening to Mr. McGee talk about rights and contracts. And I understand we don't want to trample their rights, but as a community member, our rights are currently being trampled. So something has to happen. And my question is, if the Common Council passes this as law, would that override any contract provisions, the Article 4 and 5? Would the contract have to fall in line with law?
I will let our attorney answer that, but I believe if the contract's in effect right now, I think we couldn't. But
I can't speak to the contract issues, but I welcome Mr. McGee's attorney to contact me directly and we can talk that further.
Thank you. Kelly, when they find that out, you have my email. You think you could give me an answer?
Yeah.
The question
I
is,
will.
if you guys pass this into law, would it supersede any contract provisions because it's now law? Thank you.
Right. Again,
And that's it.
I'm not.
My
an
3
attorney.
minutes is
I'm
up.
not sure.
I think
Okay.
I went like 3
Yeah,
minutes and
it's-
30 seconds. Sorry.
No problem. And so, and there's some tweaks and some fine tuning that needs to be done. So in relation to the $10,000, I would imagine that if the CPRB is kind of laying out their budget and adopting an annual budget, that would fall within there. And maybe we could even get away from that limitation and allow them to work it out however they see fit as a part of that independence. So that's just that one part of the question. The rest we'll get answers for you on. So Ms. Ayers.
Thanks so much. And I'll try to stay within 3 minutes. Just I think people have raised some great comments, and I also just want to say this looks like a great job drafting some very complicated stuff and thinking it through in a very short time. So I think kudos to everybody involved with that. As to that last question about the authority of a contract versus local legislation, for whatever it's worth, that's not a simple question to answer at all. It's currently being litigated in Rochester, and my guess is it's going to go all the way up to the Court of Appeals for a decision about whether a city council can effectively override a collective bargaining agreement. There are at least 3 different sets of state laws that affect the answer to that. I'm happy to talk anybody through them in detail, but that's a tough question. Sorry, my dog is excited by our meeting. In terms of the, I just wanted to clarify something Ms. Manning said. The CPRB hasn't yet decided what it's going to do in terms of identifying the officer or not. There was a lot of issues percolating with the collaborative that the CPRB wanted to resolve before it figured out its view on whether to name officers in its public meetings, and that issue is still on the agenda for the future. I do think that if I can go through just a couple of the specific provisions, and I can provide these later, but sorry, right with corporation, sorry, Yeti, please. Sorry, the corporation counsel and the representation of the board. I share the sense it would be useful to have more clarification on when the Government Law Center is supposed to be providing legal advice and when corporation counsel is supposed to be providing legal advice, and sort of who decides to switch off. I would hate to be in a situation where, somebody's supposed to be mad at corporation counsel before they turn to us, because that's not the relationship we want to have. But I think that could use some clarification. Similarly, I think what Corporation Counsel said in an earlier meeting, which I agreed with, was that it would be good to have the entire contract for services put out for RFP rather than given to the Government Law Center in legislation. And this legislation still names the Government Law Center in quite a few places. I think for reasons of public transparency and accountability, it would be good for that to be put out to bid or whatever you call it, just like any other government contract. And if we're the right people to do the job, that's great. And if not, somebody else should do it. I share Dr. Apleers's desire for more clarity on what kind of audit we're talking about, because yeah, I mean, if we're talking about a $500 and something $1,000 budget, that might go for one comprehensive audit, or it might be a whole bunch of them. It would be, I think it's useful to define the scope there. And then in terms of subpoena power, and particularly discipline, the giving the CPRB the power to discipline, I would urge the Common Council to flesh out a procedure for that if the intention is to give the CPRB disciplinary authority, in terms of, is there a notice of, is there some sort of a charging document that gets submitted, a notice of prospective discipline? Nobody should ever be disciplined without full notice of the charges against them and an opportunity to address those charges, awareness of their rights under the civil service law, and arbitration if that's an option. And I think all of that should be fleshed out before that power is given to the CPRB, so that, as Mr. McGee said, the officers have rights and due process, and the public has a interest in making sure that discipline is imposed in an appropriate way. Finally, just a couple of more thoughts. Right, if a complainant declines to have their complaint investigated, I know from Commander Baciuelo saying this all the time, if the Internal Affairs Unit thinks that some officer has done something wrong, they investigate it, whether there's a complainant asking them to do that or not. So it's not clear to me what effect withdrawing the complaint. I mean, if the complaint points you at misconduct, does that mean you close your eyes to it once hopefully that's not what it means. But I think that's a challenging thing to work out. The other thing, and this is maybe my biggest substantive point to raise, so the provision on page 9 of the PDF, subsection 8, where it says the chief shall take no action on a complaint until receipt of the board findings and decision. Echoing what Ms. Manning said, I would hope that if an officer is caught in egregious misconduct, investigations can take quite a long time, and I'm not sure it's the right idea to tie the chief's hands from taking action on that while the CPRB investigates. So that's all I had in terms of substantive thoughts. I'll just finish by saying the collaborative is this week finalizing all of the recommendations that the different working groups have come up with into sort of a larger document. We received I had a whole bunch of public conversations with different organizations after the draft comments were released last week. I think the final version will be better than the current version. I know the Center for Law and Justice, for example, has suggested creating a Department of Public Safety that would include both the police as one branch and unarmed response to situations where that's appropriate as an entirely separate branch of this Department of Public Safety. And I hope that whatever action the Common Council takes on this legislation, that it will remain open to revisiting it in light of the further recommendations that are coming from the collaborative. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for that. We'll have Mr. Lewis and then Ms. Vives.
Yes, hi, it's Sergeant Jim Lewis from the Albany Police Department, and I am president of the Albany Police Supervisors Union. Not to take a whole lot of time, I just want to mirror Officer Greg McGee's comments in reference to the CBA, as well as the importance of Garrity when it comes to subpoenaing testimony from officers. I know there's issues with the police unions and being able to negotiate with them. We do have an active contract right now, as you know, that goes to the end of 2022. So without really harping on all that, I just wanted to mirror what Officer McGee said, because our contracts, especially reference to discipline, mirror each other in reference to that.
Unmute. Thank you for that, Sarge. And again, I just reiterate that again, this legislation is not designed to take away anyone's rights. I mean, there's still a process beyond this process that has to play out to put this in effect. And the contract spells out things that will have to be considered. And maybe you all in the administration will hash out as we move forward to come up with something that's acceptable to everyone. At least that's my hope. So thank you for the comments.
Thank you,
Ms. Vives.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the council, to the committee, and to the staff for working on this legislation. As it's been said, there's been several meetings about this, and as promised, you all took into account the letters from the CPRB and our views and the voices of the community in putting together this legislation. Ava, thank you for addressing the issue of whether the legislation would override the contract. I think that's important too. I just want to say that I didn't see from our letters, I did not see the disciplinary power addressed. And I don't know if this is the final changes that will be made, or if there's subsequent changes to come. But I do think that that is an important piece in making the CPRB a truly independent board. I think it's great what you all have come up with thus far, but I would encourage that extra piece to be added as well. And if I missed that in the legislation, if it's there, please forgive me. I didn't have too much time to go over it, but I would strongly suggest that that be added as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify, JR, I thought that there was something there. Maybe I missed it, but.
Trying to find it right now. I'm going all over the place. Give me a second.
Okay, great.
Okay, and in the meantime, Mr. Igo, you ready? You're still muted. Yeah, you're good.
Following up on Nairobi's question, I don't know if I'm working the latest copy. It was the copy that went to that we got at the last meeting, or has that been changed? I'm also concerned about the independent disciplinary authority that was in the CPRB letter of suggestions. Is that in it, or?
Which I think maybe you're working off an older.
Yeah, it was last time, and I'm looking at one. I didn't see it. So there is something in there. If Michelle can maybe send that to me again. My concern is, I do have concern about disciplinary authority. To me, dependent suggestions I'd have no problems with, but being able to dispense it and make it stand, to me, that's like being a judge and jury all in one. And I don't think that's the proper way. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Igo. And I would say that if you, in the link that you followed to get into the meeting, that document was also attached to that. There are two versions of it, the old and
I looked
the
at
new.
one, I don't see a link. It says it's there, but nothing in the bottom, so.
Oh,
I'll look.
okay.
We aren't voting on it this evening, though.
Okay, let's see.
I just
Again-
resent it to you, Joe.
Okay.
Yes, it's page 8, letter A. Thank you, Ava. It's a long document I've been working on.
Okay, and I think at this point, were there any more comments, questions or comments, or I don't know if Commander, if you care to weigh in, or you have any thoughts about where we're at, or not quite there?
I appreciate it, Councilman. I mean, the only thing I would just add, I've maintained my position since day one that I think it's the department's best interest to reserve comment on agreeing or disagreeing with the proposals that were set forth by the board. As most of you know, I've been, intimately involved with this with the board since day one, back in the early summer, late spring. So I'm very familiar with it, but I will just echo on some of the comments that have been made here tonight by everybody. I just feel it's very critical for the police department to uphold the rights of all of our employees under the collective bargaining agreement as they currently stand, and also uphold the rights of all of our citizens that we serve. So that is the balance of my office. It's also the balance of my office to ensure that, that trust is maintained between the community and the police department, while also ensuring that our employees are doing everything that is expected of them in the proper manner and according to policy. So, with that said, I do appreciate the opportunity to comment on it, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So I think at this point, we're pretty close. I mean, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. I just feel a need to say something. I sat here and I listened to everyone's comments, and I just say that people's rights have been violated, for many years, and it has led us to this conversation right here, which is once again a difficult conversation. But it's hard for us to make the progress needed when the point of the police rights, or we understand that the police have rights because they're humans. The thing that has brought us to this conversation is because people have abused their authority, and not always has the right thing happen once these actions have been taken by the department, and so that conversation is necessary. So how do you move forward on both sides? Like, when I listened to the gentleman's last comments, he said that, they have to ensure the community's rights isn't violated, as well as the officers. And that's a tough spot to be in, because you may agree wholeheartedly with what the community is saying, but as a officer, you have to, hold the team down, so it's not, it's an uneasy conversation, because, many of us that are on this council, that sit on this council, we advocate for APD, when advocation is needed. But, it's tough when you have to have this conversation and have it, be heartfelt, because we're speaking not only some of us from personal experience, but other people's prior experiences. So I'm just always taken back, and it makes me, when I come to meetings to have this real conversation, I'm hoping that when you hear law enforcement speak, they understand that, we're at a place where we have to have this conversation because people are calling for it. And once again, not to feel attacked, but in order for us to move forward, we have to have these difficult conversations. And so, once again, in order for us to have these conversations, the people that are representing APD, we don't always have to take the position of, reiterating the things that we already know. We don't have the authority over police officers, because if we did, we wouldn't need to have this type of conversation. So I feel a need to say that, because I have been affected, personally. And as a person that has a chance to, advocate for family members and friends that have been in that situation, I want to have this conversation so we can move forward and get to a place where, if this happens, we have mechanisms in place that will address it efficiently, swiftly, and it will send a transparent message to both sides. So thank you.
Oh, geez. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I keep doing that mute thing, talking while muted. So I think we're in a good place. We're moving this along. So I would think that just the adjustments that we talked about tonight may be what's needed to move forward. So my question is, members want to make, work on those changes, come back and meet again, or maybe move it out and take care of the changes and revisions as we go along? That question is for committee members. You're unmuted now, Tom. Now you're muted. You're muted again.
Somebody. I think we should try to get it right. I was ready to go at the start of the night, but a lot of questions have been brought up. And my own feeling is that we should clean it up before we push it out. So, but I'll go along with what the rest of the committee wants to do.
Okay, okay, I missed you before, Brother Barry. I'll have you go now.
Okay, hi. I was going to echo Tom in regards to, this is a legislation piece. There are new members. As I hear Brother Derek speak about, really for me, is accountability. So we're creating a document and we're trying to move a legislation piece. So it really needs to be as finished as possible, right? So just because we've just made some tweaks, very often people think tweaks can mean that it's a changing of a verb, which can also impact kind of the process and or that department being accountable. So I guess I would vote to ask us to come back and have a clean document so that people can read with the highlights of those areas that were changed. Thank you.
Okay, so members of the, go ahead, Ms. Frederick. I'm soliciting input right now from members of the council's public safety committee, is what I'm doing.
So at this point, I think there's definitely some amendments we can make as discussed today to definitely strengthen legislation. I'm honestly in between if we should push out now or hold off, make adjustments and vote later. So if it's appropriate, I would like to just get the opinion of the newly elected CPRB chair to see what her thoughts are about refining this legislation and the process.
Thank you. This has been a lengthy process and I think a worthwhile process. But if it is possible to move it out today and make the changes going forward, I think the CPRB and the community is anxious to start reimagining what our board may be. And we have faith that the changes could be made after the vote. So if we could get the legislation voted on and out to the rest of the council, that would be great. And if anyone else from the CPRB wants to comment, I welcome you to, but I think that is our sentiment tonight.
Thank you.
If I could comment as well as a member of the CPRB, I agree that I would hope that the safety committee could move this out if possible and make the changes as they go forward. No matter what changes are put into this, it's probably going to end up being potentially some litigation. There may be potentially lobbying with the New York State Legislature regarding changes in state law, which is actually convenient for us as opposed to the city of Rochester, who is litigating this now. The legislature is located right here in Albany, and they're close to us. So I think it would be good for to move it forward. I really appreciate all the work that everyone's done on this thing, and it's definitely being done in good faith to try to preserve, well, to create more trust between the city and its police department. And it's just a very good goal for both the safety of the citizens and the safety of the police and the whole process going forward. I thank you, folks.
Okay, Sergeant Lewis.
Yes, sorry, just a quick follow-up question. I know, Kelly, you had agreed that there's some issues that would have to be taken up with the CBA at the time of negotiations in reference to this. If this were to pass either tonight or if you guys decide to come back with a further edited draft, when would all these changes be implemented? Do they get implemented immediately, or is this something that would be implemented after a current CBA is agreed upon?
Thank you for the question, Sarge. Some parts can be implemented immediately, and some parts obviously have to be put off until there's a discussion and bargaining. There's some budgetary issues where there's no budget to do some of the stuff that is outlined in this right now. So we'll probably have to, some of the stuff would have to wait until the next budget year. But Mr. Conti, you want to?
Yeah, you said, I mean, I think the budget issue is one that, you know, we were in the current year right now, our current fiscal year. So that's something in terms of might not be in place until January 1, but opportunity, because there are issues involved in putting together a budget that the CPRB members need to start talking about now. You know, this would give them a working number to work with and to put together a budget prior to the end of the year that would be available. There are other provisions that, you know, there are reporting provisions and things like that that are in here that could be effective immediately. So, you know, there's variations here. I mean, that's my thoughts.
Mr. Ballerin.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. I understand the desire to get this passed as quickly as possible. I understand that. But I also have learned a lot of what happens when you pass something too quickly and it's not cleaned up, and it's not, and these things that we talk about getting fixed, these wording issues we talk about addressing, don't get addressed in the final product. This is the USDO. And this is what we are still dealing with 4 years later and trying to clean up. This was my reading last week, and I'm still doing that. My point for saying that is, I want us to do this right. I want us to get the language correct. I don't want us to be in a situation where we're going back trying to clean up 3 years later. And that's my fear with pushing it forward, just to push it forward, that we're not going to be able to address some of the issues that have been brought up today that I think we should look at. I think we have a better document than we did months ago. I think there are things that we need to go in that were brought up today that we should look into. What I don't want, and I'd rather wait another month or another 2 or 3 weeks to get that cleaned up than have to wait another 3 years to try to address it and have to deal with consequences of it not being addressed for all those years until you get to address it. So that's my concern with just pushing it out without doing it right, without cleaning it up. And if that makes me unpopular in this room, I'll take that hit because those who know what's going on with the USDO know the hits that have happened before. So let's do this right. Let's do this. Let's clean it up. Let's do it right. Let's do it now so that we don't have any regrets 6 months from now or 2 years from now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Ballerin. We'll have Mr. Johnson and then Mr. Conti.
As a committee member, I agree with Alfredo, Kelly.
Okay. Okay.
So I would just like to say, I heard loud and clear the chair say that she wanted to move forward with this along with working to address the concerns brought up. I think a lot of discussion has been put into this document. I think that, I can't speak to the USDO, but you have members present that are all willing to work towards cleaning it up so that we could vote on this. And we spent a lot of time on this document. It's time, for it to come out and do what it's going to do. Everybody at the table is willing to work on it. I see no reason for it to prolong it when you got everybody in agreement that it's more changes to make. So if it would be different if people weren't in agreement that changes need to be made. So I don't see the need to hold it up to make the changes when everybody is okay moving forward to make the changes. So thank you.
I guess the only thing I want to say is I respect the show. I respect the time the board has put into this. There's no question. I respect that. But I just am showing, I'm giving a little of my experience of what has happened or what I have learned can happen when you don't clean it up before it goes forward. That's all I'm trying to share. We all agree the changes that we're looking to make, let's make them. Let's clean it up. Let's have a final document that we can feel comfortable with when it's voted on.
Hey, Mr. Conti.
Quick question. Is there, I believe there's another meeting of the Public Safety Committee that's already been scheduled.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
February 8th.
February 8th, okay. It is possible to turn this document around and put it on the agenda for February 8th with the revisions that we've discussed to take it up at the council meeting on February 18th as far as making the amendments with, I'm just trying to lay out a timeline with passage at the meeting by the full council at the meeting of Monday, March 1st.
Okay, thank you for
Just laying
that.
out the potential timeline that would, do it.
Right, and so, Mr. Hoey, you, and then I'll jump in.
Sure. Yeah, I just had a point of information. If we were to pass this tonight, would it be voted on Monday's meeting? I mean, that's where I'm
No.
seeing, okay, thank you.
No,
No, because
gotta
amendments.
age.
You gotta
Yeah,
age.
it has an aging requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
The earliest right now, if you do it, could be on February 18th is the earliest because of the aging.
Okay, just making sure, just to finish up. So right now, we're close. I could, 1, 2, 3, just a show of hands of the committee members that want to move forward with it. At this point. All right, so it looks.
I just say something. That's not a fair question, Kelly. Because
We'll not move forward with.
I'm not saying that people don't want to move forward. It's just saying people want to get it cleaned up.
I think, but I think people in the room are smart enough to understand that, what that actually meant. But in any case, it looks like, again, I'd like to say to folks that have been waiting on this, it's gonna happen. We're just about at its final form. I'm inclined to, at this point, hold off because timeline-wise, the 18th or of February or 2 weeks later, again, we can get those changes made, come back at the February 8th meeting, pass it. That'll be a very brief discussion at that February 8th public safety meeting to move it along. Then it'll age in its final form prior to us passing it. So I'm at this point for just holding off, just based on the response that I got. It looks like there's only 2 people in the committee that want to move forward with it at this point. It's neither, again, it's coming. It's going to happen, and that couple of weeks isn't going to make a difference. Let's do it right. So at this point, the plan is work on the language, come back February 8th, along with the other business we have to take care of at the public safety meeting. Finish this, vote on it. And,
Kelly, can I ask you a question?
Move it along.
Kelly, can I ask you a question? How many people voted? If 2 people said, how many committee members are here?
5.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's what we're gonna do. Again, the format and the content that we spoke of tonight, that's in there. Everyone can look at that. That's in there. That's not going anywhere. It's not changing or being withdrawn. That's where we're at. We're adding the language and changing stuff based on some of the comments, and that's going to be the final form, and we'll move forward with it on our meeting at the 8th. We'll get the changes made and get it out in advance to folks so they can look at it, and but that's what we're going to do. We're changes, February 8th vote, and then move forward with it when we're able to, based on aging requirements. So any other questions or comments? Ms. Frederick?
Yeah, just to add to that, Kelly, I think we talked about a lot of potential adjustments here, and it came from various angles, and most of which sounded like, very legitimate changes that we should be making to the legislation. So if everybody can send in those comments as soon as possible, I think the way this timeline works is it's going to perfectly age, right, on the 8th. Is that? Yeah.
No.
So if we don't pass on the 8th, then we're pushing out even further than the 2-week period. So I'm really hoping that we go in at the 8th meeting. Personally, I would have preferred it to go out today, but committee voted. So I'm really hoping we can come to the 8th meeting and pass this out and then move forward with it passing on the March meeting.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, make the motion that we adjourn. Okay? Thank you, everyone, for your participation and contributions. Man, be safe and have a good night. Thanks.